Destiny's given me like 7 warnings that he's streaming now because last time we had a call, I had no idea he was live. Could have just fully doxed myself. No worries. Oh, there we go. Yes, I can hear you. Chat, can you hear him? Say something.
Something. Hello? Testing. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Perfect. All right. How's it going today?
Pretty good. How are you going today?
Good, good. I stayed up late reading through a bunch of the case files from January 6th to make sure I was ready for this.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, they're pretty interesting. So first, I don't know if you watched my video I did the other day just about the FBI update, essentially saying they couldn't find any solid evidence that there was any plan for an insurrection. Would you? I think you generally agree with that statement, right?
My understanding was that the FBI said that 95% of the individuals didn't seem to have been organized, but it was relatively organic. But I do believe there have been a few people charged with conspiracy. Now, there haven't been any convictions yet, but there have been a couple related to the Oath Keepers that were charged with actual conspiratorial charges. So they had been like planning things in advance. They had like code names. They'd communicated with each other and everything.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of the problems of why people misunderstand those charges and the whole insurrection statement actually come from prosecutors that were involved in the January 6th indictments coming out and saying they were going to get, or they had charges or strong evidence for motives to incite a rebellion, which is much different than conspiracy. So obviously motives to incite a rebellion or to take over the country is way heavier of a charge than just conspiracy, which in some cases, when they're talking about conspiracy in these documents, they're just talking about like general protest planning, right? So
Yeah, has anybody been charged with a rebellion charge? Has that been a thing?
no. So this is what's
Okay.
so funny is when I was reading through the cases last night, and this is where we may disagree, is I think a bunch of these charges are completely trumped up for political reasons. And if you asked me a week ago, I wouldn't have said that because I had not spent the time looking into them. So a bunch of these prosecutors are super giddy about this being a very popular political case. They are like, if I get one of these January 6th charges below my belt and people see that I got someone for it, especially if they're a big name like an Owen Schroyer or something, or Oathkeeper, Proud Boy, then that's going to be like on my resume, right? And so all these prosecutors got super giddy with the media. And one guy actually went on 60 Minutes and said, we have strong evidence, a ton of evidence showing that we're going to be able to get these people or a few of these people for incitement of rebellion. And the DOJ got so pissed off with these prosecutors going and telling the media all this stuff, they actually almost put a gag order on the entire case or the entire indictment process because all of these prosecutors were going out and just making fools of them on statements that were completely untrue. So as you said, absolutely zero charges for inciting a rebellion, none. And even their conspiracy
to be
charges
clear,
are
real
falling
quick.
through.
So I haven't heard of any conspiracy charges falling through yet.
We can go through that.
Yeah, sure. In terms of the incitement to rebellion, I don't know what people have been saying in terms of like going like. I don't care what people go to the media with. I'm more interested to see what charges are actually filed because people go to the media and say dumb and stupid shit all the time. For a really good example of that, we can look at Rudy Giuliani, who in front of the media was like the big dog, and then in front of a judge was the tiny dog. Because a lot of the charges that he said he was going to bring publicly were way different than what actually got filed in court. So yeah, I'm sure there were some people going on to media saying like, oh, we're gonna get these guys on fucking rebellion or crazy shit. But as far as I'm aware, not very many charges were filed related to conspiracy. The vast majority, I think, were like disorderly conduct and trespassing and stuff like that. Which sounds like, depending on if you're on video or not, it sounds like they're actually pretty easy charges to nail somebody on. Like the Owen guy or whatever, I think was charged with, there were a few, they were all misdemeanor charges, but I think it was like disorderly conduct and trespassing or whatever, which seems like, I mean, if you have them on video doing it, I mean, we can say that like this is for political reasons, but I guess we'll see how it plays out in court. I feel like the DOJ would get pretty upset if a whole bunch of prosecutors were like running to file bullshit charges that weren't going to stick. I feel like
they are
probably going through
They're very upset.
Very upset that charges are being filed, or very upset that people are going to the media and saying
no, very
shit?
upset that the actual charges being filed are like super embarrassingly bad. So here,
Wait, yeah. What is the source on that? Because I'm curious
okay.
now, because I haven't heard that yet. Yeah.
So let me just read you. This is a Reuters article. Uh, 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 if it turns out prosecutors misunderstood the meaning of certain text messages, that would not be a small error, Ferrara says. This could color the way the judge sees this case going forward and impact the outcomes of everything from plea deals to motions to dismiss, Ferrara added. So this article is all about all of these different text messages, which I'm not even joking. Like in the court cases, some of the defenses are my client meant that in Minecraft, basically. Like they were taking the piss, and it actually like held up because they found out the people sending the messages. So there was okay. I'll just give you an example of case, and I'm going to send you this this article right now, and then give you an example of one of these cases where the charges were just so stupid compared to what actually happened. I just linked that to you.
Wait, hold on. Give me like 20 seconds real quick. I'm reading this Reuters article that you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, read the Oath Keepers guy, Thomas Caldwell. He was one of the big ones that played a leadership role in the Oath Keepers, was planning to trap politicians in tunnels and gas them all with his two co-conspirators that prosecutors wanted to have arrested as well. And all of it fell through as bullshit.
Okay, so the Reuters one was about how people are worried that, again, I'm looking just for nobody's been charged with like sedition. A charge of sedition, meaning incitement of a rebellion, has not been brought against any of the more than 400 people arrested to date. The most serious charges have been assault, conspiracy, and obstruction of Congress or law enforcement. Okay. And then, oh wait, yeah, oh sorry, I Googled this while you were reading it. Okay, go for it. And then what's the next thing?
Yeah, so, well, I just want that Thomas Caldwell one, so retired U.S. Navy officer from Virginia. They claimed he had a leadership role within the Oath Keepers, that he was plotting to destroy parts of the Capitol. And they accused Caldwell of having two co-conspirators that were helping him, telling him to seal members of Congress in tunnels and turn on the gas. And prosecutors were asking for the judge to have his co-conspirators detained as well. And it was later found out that Caldwell was not even a dues-paying member of the Oath Keepers. They lacked the evidence to even prove he was at the Capitol that day. And as for the Facebook messages, the two guys that were apparently his co-conspirators helping him plan and get people in the tunnels were 60 miles away from the Capitol. Caldwell never even responded to them, and they were basically just taking the piss. And so, like, that was just one of those big conspiracy charges that they had. And there's multitudes of these where they are just so desperate to get someone. They are so desperate to have these charges stick on someone. They're just throwing everything at the wall, and it's falling apart and making an embarrassment of the whole process.
I wouldn't call it an embarrassment. I mean, this is how the process works, right? Like, like people will try to see what they can charge. They can see what they can make stick. In the discovery process, you go back and forth and you see what's there and what's not. And then sometimes at the end of the day, like some of the evidence is too flimsy. The DA says, we're probably not going to get a case here. And then like you drop some of the charges. Like that's just how the process works, no?
Right. But a lot of it is getting to the point where it's so clearly, and this is, I mean, anything with the DOJ, any of these indictment process, of course, they're going to have a political swing to them anyways. But when I say they're like trumped up charges, it's like they are desperately trying to get people on really, really tiny things like Owen Schroyer being on the steps that they normally would not go after people for, just because I mean, to be fair, there is something.
You say, to be clear, real quick, because you keep saying trumped up charges, but I don't see any of that. Like, because the charges that I'm aware of so far, and even the Reuters article you sent me, are all like relatively conservative. Like, I think the worst charges that I've heard of that were filed were like assault charges against some of the officers, which I don't think are that insane, at least on some of the videos I saw. And I don't know who specifically was charged, but I don't think there are many trumped up charges. It wouldn't surprise me that for some of the 400 people charged, that for some, or maybe even a decent number of these people, that they go through and they're like, okay, well, you know, this video isn't the best evidence, or we can't really prove this as much. And then you drop some of the charges. But this is like how our legal system works. Like, it's not like people are you know, like being convicted and then like it was overturned 10 years later. Like, this is part of the process. As for Owen, I mean, a lot of our justice system is built around discretionary application of the law. You know, not everybody is charged 100% all the time with everything. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if Owen got charged as much as they could, even for stuff that seems kind of minor, because this is a guy that was like on air, like encouraging people to be like pretty extreme, like prior to this. And I'm sure they're probably going to factor that in when it comes to like the judge evaluating the case, or being like, like, okay, well, you were trespassing, you're getting the full whatever for trespassing. But again, even for Owen, those were all misdemeanor charges. It's not like he's being like
Yeah.
charged with like attempted murder. I don't even think he's being charged with conspiracy. I don't believe.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like that's what's so interesting with Owen's case is they do mention the statements he made on social media, but they don't actually attempt to go for any sort of charge based on that of incitement. And I think that is because they've gotten a bit gun shy with putting charges that are overblown or they can't quite get. So it is, to me, it is still a technicality being on the steps. And
I mean, if it's wrong, if it's against the law,
you're right.
it's against the law.
It is. It is against the law.
Incitement is really hard, and it would surprise me if they tried to go on incitement for any of the media figures. Even because, like, even when I was covering this, even in the prime of what was going on, I think a lot of things that people said were like, this was clearly incitement. But when it comes from a legal point of view, if you've got people in media that are giving messages and then you call that incitement, you are setting really scary precedents there.
Yes.
And even for Trump, I don't even know if I was coming for Trump being charged, even though all of it was clearly incited by him. But even for Trump, I don't know if I would be comfortable like charging him with incitement to riot, because it's like, well, fuck, like how many other things could you say that could be counted as an incitement to riot? Like, I feel like that has to be reserved for literally, like, you're standing outside with a microphone saying, get in there and kill those motherfuckers. Like, it has to be very, very, very clear. Otherwise, that's a huge potential First Amendment case. But other than that, like, I don't really see any, like I don't get, like, all the trumped up charges. Like, it seems like the charges were relatively appropriate. And then for some people, like, the evidence is too scant and they decide not to go forward with it. But I think that's a pretty natural part of, like, the legal process.
Okay, so what I would say to that is, I agree that if someone, typically these cases are happening where if they can't get proof, they can't even prove they're at the Capitol, they're falling through. But they are very deliberately and meticulously pursuing these cases because of the political circumstances around it. Now, if they broke the law, they broke the law. That's their fault. There are some of these documents I was going through last night where it's like, okay, it's so fucking obvious what you did, dude. Like one of the guys, I'm trying to remember his name. I think I wrote it down. Oh yeah, Philip Young, for example. If you go through his case documents, he's there's like a clear photo of him taking a knife and just slowly emptying all of these government vehicle tires, just sitting there with his pocket knife going into all the wheels. And he's actually wearing his workers' trade union shirt. So on any other day, lefties would be calling him very based for his actions. But yeah, so there's ones that are just obvious, like, of course. But there's so many in here where it's like, Tammy flew from Ohio and was sitting on her phone and taking pictures, and their evidence is like a photo of her on Facebook saying, I cannot believe what is happening here. I want to go get some pictures inside the Capitol because that's cool. And to me, the big comparison I wanted to make here is if they charge anyone who enters the Capitol on trespassing charges, then it's like, okay, well then, sucks to suck, right? But I was really getting into the Kavanaugh protest stuff the other day because, of course, that was also, of course, of a very different nature. I'm not comparing the two. I'm more so comparing misdemeanor charges because the actions in Kavanaugh were mostly misdemeanor as well. And how they treat these two different groups based on the political pressures publicly. Do you know much about the Kavanaugh protests from 2018?
I don't know what any of the charges were for that, but it wouldn't surprise me if these were treated differently. And I would say, yeah, obviously they probably should be.
I don't know about that.
So again, like part of this, so people on the left and the right oftentimes don't like this, but I mean, discretion when it comes to charging is a pretty important part of our legal system, and it's exercised at every single step of our legal system. So for instance, when a police officer first identifies you, he is already exercising discretion. Let's say that he sees you speeding down the street and he's like, all right, am I gonna pull this guy over? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe when he pulls you over, maybe he runs your plates. Maybe he's like, should I write him a ticket? Should I not? Maybe he does it. Maybe he charges you. When you go in front of a judge, he can exercise discretion. Like you can ask for forgiveness. You can ask for, a continuance on the case. You can like try to plead to something different. Like there's so much discretion at every level. the factors that are involved at every single level here are going to be incredibly important to how something was charged. So let's say, for instance, me and a group of like 20 friends, we decide to protest. We decide to protest on Capitol Hill. Like, hey, I don't like. I think Democrats and Republicans or one party is they suck. They're not defending workers. And let's say we don't get our permit and we don't do anything right, and we go to the steps and we wave around our signs. We're like, yeah, fuck this, fuck this. Like, there's a chance that, say we're all like college kids, there's a chance that security could be called. They come by and they see us and they're like, hey, get the fuck out of here. What the fuck you guys doing? Maybe they arrest like one or two people that are like in charge of it. But for the most part, they're like, fuck off. But if you showed up with a bunch of people and you were like, we're going to find and get Pence. We're going to fucking get this country back. Fuck this shit, blah, blah, blah. And you're like breaking into the building and shit, or not breaking it, but say you're walking it or whatever. And you're like way more rowdy, way more boisterous, way more disrespectful, way more rude. You might actually see way more charges go to that crowd because it's like, okay, well, you guys are fucking assholes. Now we're going to throw the book at you. But that's like a totally normal part of the entire, it's like a central part of our criminal justice system. So when you talk to me about like Kavanaugh protests, now it might be the case that they went to Capitol Hill and they tried to break in and they wanted to like get like lawmakers and shit. I'm willing to bet they probably didn't. So it wouldn't surprise me if way less charges there were filed than a bunch of people that are breaking down the doors, going in, ranting about getting Pence, walking around through the building trying to find lawmakers, like going through offices. Like I think that that's probably pretty reasonable. I think that's like an okay part of our legal system.
Okay,
Sorry,
yeah, no, I don't disagree with you that there's, even just on a basic policing level, for anyone out there, I've been arrested a few times in my life, and almost every time I've never gotten charged. I have no criminal record because every time I'm very polite and just do what the cops say. It's the attitude check they do. How's your attitude? I'm probably gonna, if you're a dick to me, I'm probably gonna throw the book at you. Absolutely. So I have no doubt that some of that was involved. However, first of all, the idea of running around the halls and going to get Pence, that also came from media statements. They were saying that we're gonna, the guy with the horns, I can't remember his name, people in my chat probably do, they were claiming that he had intentions to go and try to go and assassinate politicians. All of that was walked back. So that's just kind of fake news spread. So far, I haven't seen any actual evidence other than the walked back attempt to get Horns guy for that. As for the Kavanaugh protest, this is what I find very interesting about the two, is they both had and were missing one piece of what was needed for an insurrection, looking at the information available. In the Kavanaugh protest, they had all of the organized and stated intent. They had literally tweeted out our goal from the Women's March page, verified, millions of people seeing this. Our goal is to storm the Capitol, to take it over, and prevent the Democratic, appointment of Kavanaugh. And we will do whatever we can. We like, you go into offices, you take over the Capitol, we'll take it over for days. That is our intent, to overturn the democratic process. But then they had absolutely none of the follow through, like none of the actual ability to succeed at that. Whereas the Capitol riot had all of the follow through, but none of the intent. So they couldn't prove any of the intent that people were going there for the purpose of overthrowing the democratic process. So in that case, it's interesting. Do you treat them differently? Do we look at them differently just because one tried to do that but was less successful? And in the case of the Kavanaugh protest, most people wouldn't know this. And this was what was so frustrating to me, is misinformation is a bitch, but a lack of information is just as frustrating. And there was a serious lack of information when I was trying to look into the Kavanaugh protests last night. People wouldn't know it, but there were hundreds, some articles even said 1,000 arrests that happened at Kavanaugh. Because I was sitting around thinking, did they arrest no one? Have they applied the law differently to people for Trump protesters versus left-wing protesters? But no, they actually didn't. They arrested hundreds of people at the Kavanaugh protests for misdemeanors. And they just didn't get charged with anything, right? They just, they let them go on the spot, and they were processing them all on the spot. Now, there were about 17 women who directly planned to go into a senator, the senator of West Virginia's office, and take it over with the explicit intent of making him change his vote or change his his decision on Kavanaugh. And they took over his office. They actually stayed there till 1 a.m. after the police had told them, listen, we're going to charge you with trespassing if you don't leave. And their explicit intent, taking over his office, illegally trespassing, was to threaten him until he changed his vote, that they weren't going to leave. And of those 17 women, I believe 9 were charged with trespassing, a few left before that end time. But to me, looking at that, I could not find anything about them having gotten, actually seeing those charges go through. I'm not sure if the charges were dropped. I'm not sure what happened with them. There was no massive media indictment about how these women were trying to, affect the democratic process through illegal taking over of his office and trespassing. I couldn't find anything in the media. In fact, the only article I could find were sympathetic articles talking about how all of these women believe their arrests were worth it to try to pressure the government. And, once again, that brings up the question, do we treat them differently just because they sucked more in their execution of illegal activities?
Yeah, I mean, so things are going to be treated differently, but I mean, like, yeah, of course. But that's not only is that always going to be the case, that probably should be the case. Like, they might have had a website set up where they had plans to take over the government, but like the Trump crowd was literally shouting like, hang Pence, hang Pence.
Do you have that video? Because I literally have not seen proof for that, but if there is, like, I'm interested to see it.
I think we watched this on one of the New York Times things. But if somebody wants to, oh, here, hold on one second.
Yeah, I'll just check it out.
Fuck, I fucked the link up. Let me listen to this real quick, one sec, to make sure this is the right one. This is what somebody linked me.
Like, I don't doubt there was some idiot in the crowd doing that for sure.
This is a shorter clip of it, but this sounds more than like one person.
Yep.
So, I mean, like, when you have like a crowd that's that energized and is there for the reasons that they're there, of course, it's always going to be treated differently. Like, yeah, I don't know. It seems like I feel like a lot of problems that have happened over the past 2 years with people criticizing government or our justice system, and when I say our, I mean American, because it might be different in Canada, is a lot of people just don't understand how a lot of the institutions work. There is going to be like a lot of like, it sounds crazy, but like, even the outfit that you choose to go to court in is going to have a bearing on how the judge treats you. Like, for dumb reasons, I've been arrested before, and I've watched a judge throw somebody out of court before because of how they showed up. Like, he continued the case and he told them to get the fuck out and to come back when they were ready to like actually like be in court. Like, I've seen this happen firsthand, and I'm sure it happens like way more in other places. Yeah, I mean, like, when it comes to everything related to the January 6th stuff and how extreme and how crazy that whole event was, nothing is that surprising to me. Like, I mean, you said trumped up charges over and over again, but like, all the charges are pretty conservative. There were no like dissident or rebellious charges or sedition charges filed. They
we're
had
talking
400
about the
plus
conspiracy
arrests.
charges that are all that, not all, but you have conspiracy charges that are falling through because they can't even prove some of these people were in the Capitol, and some of these people are sitting in jail right now, right? So that's why it's such a big deal. It's not just like, all right, we'll throw this at the wall and see if it sticks, and if it doesn't stick, then awesome, justice, made its way through the court systems. But
sure, but I mean,
it's like some people are in jail right now.
I mean, like, even for the Kavanaugh stuff, right? A lot of those people were probably arrested. They were probably booked in holding, and then at the end of the day, they're like, we're not gonna try to prove like who was at a fucking riot or whatever. We're just gonna like release them all. Like, that's just kind of what
they
happens.
fined them $35. I'm not even joking.
Well, maybe, okay, but like, I mean, you're going to this is part of what you do when you go to a protest or a riot, and I mean, this is kind of what you have to be ready for. If you show up to a protest or a riot, there's a chance that you're going to get arrested. If you don't want to like go through that part of the legal system, then you probably shouldn't be there.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that they shouldn't go through the legal system. I'm saying that the overall process of this all, both from media, from government, and the DOJ, has been highly politicized. And because of that, you're seeing ridiculous charges that are following through. You're seeing media spread so much misinformation about it to the point where people literally think that there was a Taliban-like plot to take over the government, to the point where some of the biggest filmmakers in the left-wing sphere, like Michael Moore, are sharing that opinion, and almost none of it is being corrected publicly, and even more so, some of it is spilling into the legal cases where, you have Gerald B. Lefcourt, who was one of the lawyers who defended the Black Panthers and the Chicago 7, and he said they're obviously just trying to build up the most horrendous cases possible because that's what the public wants, and it is the politicizing of criminal justice, and that's what I have a problem with. I do not have a problem with people being brought to court because they committed illegal actions. Yes, there's always going to be bias in some of these cases. Yes, there is always going to be, if an event was more scary publicly, or, there were more bad actors, even if you weren't one of those bad actors, you're probably going to get dragged in the net. But there is a very obvious, you already have evidence that some of these people obviously committed illegal acts. Get them on that. The obvious politicizing and overextending of some of these narratives that anyone can go and read in the documents. It's out there. Hell, 14 of the people that are included in these arrests for the January 6th riot in some of the public articles are people that were just out past curfew. Like, that's it. They were out past curfew.
But out past curfew, that's a chargeable offense, is it not?
For sure, but they're being thrown in as January 6th criminals. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not, again, so that's not crazy. Like, that's what's just gonna happen, right? Because how many people, when you go to start arresting people in a crowd like that, how many people are gonna say, I'm just here, I'm not protesting, right? Like, that's pretty obvious that that's going to be a thing that you run into. So you charge people, you jail them, or you see if you have charges for them, and if not, then you let them out. In terms of I feel like a lot of first of all, we have to separate two institutions. We have to separate the media from the actual legal system, because these two things exist in an entirely different world. Now, I know that they bleed over for sure, but I'm saying that our treatment of them and our expectations of them are completely different. The media is fucked. In terms of how they report on a lot of this. I'm not here to defend the media's reporting on any of this ever, because there are a lot of things that could be improved from a lot of different directions, for sure. But when we look at just the legal side of things and how the charges are going, right? When we say that charges are falling through, your implication when you say that is that oh man, they're beating all these cases and all of these charges were made up and blah, blah, blah. No, 400
That's not
people
my
were arrested.
implication.
Sure. Okay, but I'm just saying that's what it sounds like, right? When you're charges are falling through, it was all politicized. It was a political rally. Of course, there's going to be a lot of heated things and different people with different opinions here. But it's also not surprising. I would be shocked. If in the history of anything in the United States, if 100+ people get arrested and a whole bunch of charges over the next few weeks aren't just kind of dropped, where they look through and they're okay, this guy was not this guy didn't do this guy wasn't supposed to be here, this dude was just picking up his fucking brother, this guy who didn't do this shit, right? That's probably completely a natural thing. I bet that happens anytime hundreds of people are arrested for anything. So I don't know, I think that when you see 400 people arrested and you see the charges are conservative, they're not incredibly crazy. You don't see the sedition stuff, and then you start seeing some charges drop off. All of this so far looks like it's just proceeding as it should to me. Nothing seems out of place or out of character. Now, if people like Alex Jones or the Owen guy, if those guys are being booked and charged with sedition or some shit, now I'd be oh, okay, well, this is getting a little bit scary. All right. But some, prosecutors going into the media on the 60 Minutes talking, a whole bunch of shit. Fucking people do this all the time. Look at that the Cohen did this. The one lawyer for the porn star woman against Trump did this. Giuliani's done this. That fucking lawyers, no offense, but lawyers talk so much shit, and they'll do it anywhere where somebody will listen to them. I know this in real life, and I know this on the media. So yeah, I don't see anything super wrong so far. I don't see anything where it's oh my God, this is so fucked. A bunch of people got arrested. Some charges are dropping off. The system is doing as it should right now.
Okay, fair enough. I think we agree on more than we disagree on the Capitol stuff. There are people that deserve charges. There are charges and absolutely public stuff being said by the prosecutors that are completely overblown. Let me ask, do you think that your audience, the general public, have an accurate analysis or understanding of what is going on with the indictments and what went down on January 6th at all?
Absolutely not. But that's an indictment, I think, of the media, not of our legal system.
Right. What about your own audience? Because I actually wanted to have this conversation with you, because it was a lot of people in your audience that particularly had a problem with my video saying that January 6th was not an insurrection, and they were like, how dare she downplay it?
I would think that probably 40 to 50% of my audience probably thinks that there was a massively coordinated plan, and that like 30 to 40% of the people in the building had all like prior like armed up and they all had handcuffs. Probably that wouldn't surprise me, because that is what the prevailing media narrative is around this event.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we can agree on that then. The media have just been absolute
and that sucks.
shit.
But my frustration though is that while 95% of what people, even in my fucking community, might believe is fucking horseshit, it was still like a historically horrendous event that I think is really unique in American history. And I think that it is something that like should be looked upon like in a pretty serious way. Not necessarily that like every person needs the craziest charges or whatever, but that we essentially had like a sitting president that was more or less like driving these events like front and center. And I think that's a really, really, really fucked up thing. And I think there's something really unique about that.
Do you think that, you know, I don't disagree, and I won't push it because I'm pretty sure you'd agree the same with all the BLM riots and stuff. But do you think that Trump...
Sorry, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
You know, as in, you'd agree that at least, because I get annoyed when people say this is a historic event that we need to focus on, but also, you know, the BLM riots, forget about that.
I never saw, when Biden was talking about the BLM riots, the only thing I ever saw Biden say was that we need to stop the rioting. That's what I heard Biden say over and over again. I never heard. Now, I know that there were a couple of stupid statements made that were highly irresponsible by, I think Pelosi maybe even made one, but the general gist of the Democratic Party was not supporting the riots. Like when I say Democratic, I mean the lawmakers and the politicians, and definitely not like Biden. And I think that's way different than the messaging that came from the top down in the Republican Party, where it wasn't just Sean Hannity, it wasn't just Tucker Carlson, it was Trump saying that we need to fight to take this country back, that they're trying to steal the election. And that's what I think makes it unique and uniquely historical, is because the president of the United States was the one cheerleading that stuff. That's why I think it was.
I would disagree that there wasn't a swath of Democrat politicians and leaders using similar rhetoric. I mean, there's a video that came out, and it's literally a compilation of just Nancy Pelosi and all of these Democrat talking heads on CNN literally saying, people need to start taking to the streets. People need to start fighting back. We need to take back these streets. Like, there was a lot of language like that. And I mean, you won't like this because it's a Donald Trump Jr. tweet, but it's actual footage of all the Democrats saying this. And if you want to suggest that there was not an equal amount of incitement from both parties, I would recommend you at least play that video or watch it.
Sure. So I mean, I can watch. Yeah. So I can watch the compilation. But the thing that I think is unique and different, and the issue that I have with populists in general, it would have been Bernie Sanders, but because Trump won, it's Donald Trump. My issue is that having a whole bunch of politicians talking about taking to the streets and fighting back and blah blah blah, I think that is fundamentally different than having somebody that is part of the government attacking part of your most fundamental institutions. Because Donald Trump wasn't saying like, oh, you just need to take the streets. Donald Trump was accusing the entire institution that was the United States democratic process of being fundamentally hollowed out and worthless.
Dude, how is that any worse than accusing the entire system of being racist and intentionally shooting black people in the streets just because they're black? This is simply the rhetoric of politics in 2020, 21. I agree. Like, it's insane to assert some of these things, but unfortunately, that's just where the rhetoric has gone with politics in general.
So I would agree that for some Democratic lawmakers that the rhetoric got a little bit too spicy. I would definitely agree with that. However, there's a fundamental difference between a lot of parts of the U.S. Criminal justice system are racist, which maybe it's a separate conversation. There's decent evidence that there is some racial bias, maybe not as bad as progressives claim, but there is definitely some racial bias. There's a difference between that claim versus saying your entire democratic system is broken, and if you don't show up and kill these fucking politicians, everything is going to be taken from you. Those two things are worlds apart in terms of severity.
Who said we need to show up and kill these politicians?
So it's not show up and kill the. Sorry, those were my words. I'm not quoting somebody. But when the
Right. I
messaging
don't
over
think
and over
anyone
again,
was saying that.
sure. I mean, I can give you like we can go and look up 30 Donald Trump quotes about how you need to fight to take this country back, that people are going to steal your country from you, that people are going that the election is rigged, that all the votes are rigged. Right? When you're getting this over and over again, when people are telling you that like your country's being taken from you, your country's going to be, and these are like more or less verbatim Donald Trump quotes. I can go and look it up, and you think that you feel that way, that like your country's being stolen and the votes are rigged, and you need to go and protest. Well, what is your only option? Right? There's no point in protesting because the democracy is broken. So violence is literally the only answer. And that's my issue. Donald Trump's rhetoric made it sound as though violence was the only solution left. On that day, he even tweeted out that Pence, the last line of defense, had failed. So like, what are you supposed to do as a citizen at that point?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. The only thing I would say is we should really look at how we got to that state. As in, we should look at the fact that we, for the last 2, 3, 4 years, it's become impossible or very difficult to have conversations that aren't extremely hyperbolic, to the point where right now, I mean, we could sit here and dissect them, and it's going to be pretty fucking difficult to distinguish what is a rhetorical flourish versus what is an actual order, which is why even you yourself are uncomfortable with the idea of Owen Schroyer getting charges for incitement, because that leads to like the open floodgates of almost every media figure being brought in for trying to incite riots. Yourself too, probably, for some of your rhetorical flourishes, right? And we need to talk about why we've got to that point, how we get back from that point. And I do think there's a very good point that because of the following actions, obviously, and because Trump is Trump, people took Trump's rhetorical flourishes way more seriously than they do 99% of the other groups of people that normalized this behavior.
I mean, like Trump claiming that our election was rigged is not a rhetorical flourish, right? Trump saying that Pence failed to protect the election, that's not a rhetorical
Well, I was
flourish.
more so talking about the we need to take our nation back kind of thing. We need to take these straight backs as rhetorical flourishes. But when you're talking about direct misinformation, don't pretend that isn't existing on all sides to great degrees.
There are different levels of misinformation, and that's the problem. The only reason the United States made it through 4 years of Trump, regardless of how you feel about him, the only reason we made it through is because somehow the institutions in the United States are actually pretty powerful. They actually do what they're supposed to, and I think that surprised for the more astute people and not the people that are doomsaying everything. I think it was actually really surprising at how well the majority of our institutions held up. But to have somebody that is sitting at the head of state that is constantly trying to destroy these institutions and say that every part of these institutions is rigged, that you can't trust anything. You can't trust the FBI. You can't trust any of the intelligence. You can't trust my own DOJ. He threw his own attorney general, multiple attorney generals under the bus. You can't trust the Department of Homeland Security. He threw all of his own people under the bus. You can't trust you can't trust anything, even the electoral process. Some of the state governors can't be trusted, right? That is fundamentally different than, and I will say, I didn't like a lot of the rhetoric that came out of some left-leaning state lawmakers and even some of the federal ones. That's way different than saying like the police are rigged. We need to do something about the police.
Okay, right now you're trying to. This is my opinion. It sounds like you're trying to privilege the misinformation you don't like as more dangerous than the misinformation that comes from the left, and I just cannot agree. I think that while the Capitol riot itself was absolutely a historical and, a terrifying event, I'm sure, for some people. The riots over all of 2020 did far more damage, destroyed far more lives, led to far more loss of life. And people just don't want to talk about the misinformation that led to that. People want to exaggerate and blow up the misinformation around what Trump said because it's politically convenient.
I think that there's room to talk about that, but I mean, even when we talk about the BLM riots, there were over 15,000 people got arrested for that, right? It wasn't like, or it might have been 17,000 or 20,000. I'd have to go look. There were a lot of people that got arrested over the BLM riot stuff. The problem is that the BLM, there's a lot to unpack. I would consider
what is okay, if you are told that cops are just slaughtering black people in the streets, that they are inherently racist, they will just shoot you, there's no justice system that works, they don't care, violence is the only answer to that too, and that's what we saw for an entire year, and you're trying to act as if these things are not comparable.
So the difference is the level of misinformation and the type of institution that you're attacking. So I will agree. Well, the first thing that I'll reject is the first thing you said is where our disagreement is you're saying that like I prefer some forms of misinformation over others. Of course I do. Everybody does. There are absolutely some forms of misinformation that are less harmful than others. So, for instance, a lot of people listening right now think that you need to drink like 16 glasses of water a day. That's actually totally bullshit. It's based on some child medical study. It's actually completely not true. But a lot of people think it. There's a whole subreddit called Hydro Homies based off it. But that information is like relatively harmless. Misinformation is relatively harmless. Okay. Now, scaling this up, if we look at a lot of the stuff around the BLM riots, okay, I know you've heard me talk about like Rittenhouse and shit. I hate a lot of the misinformation that exists around a lot of the police narratives in this country. I hate it. Everybody thinks if you get pulled over by a cop, you're gonna get executed, et cetera, et cetera. I think a lot of this is stupid. But that level of misinformation, one, only like puts at odds like people with local police departments, a lot of which got changed and then rolled back because people are like, okay, wait, this is stupid. We can't defund our police. We've got crime. This is dumb. And two, where it came from, it wasn't the president of the United States saying we need to destroy all cops. We need to get rid of the cops. All of the cops have been rotten. Even Obama, even when he was at his highest virtue signaling point, was never saying things like we need to get rid of all the cops in this country. But Trump was. Trump was saying the whole country was rigged. Every institution was rigged. Every part of it was rotten to the core. I do think that there is a difference between these two levels of misinformation, even if I do disagree with them both.
Okay. Just because you have a preference for some misinformation doesn't make that misinformation more principled or a sustainable view. There's both Trump and both BLM we're trying to portray, at least with the description you gave, that there is an apartheid state of which one side is getting totally fucked over and the other side isn't. And there's no way to oppose this because the system is broken. So we have to violently take it over and take it down. And, you know, just as you've made the claim, oh, well, we had some BLM people that came out and went, taking down the police is stupid. We need to walk that back a bit. I could take the quotes of Trump saying, come out and make your voice heard peacefully. Don't invade the Capitol. Don't do this. But that does not take away the fact that we already saw all of these statements publicly. We can see the effect and impact that they had. And I don't know, man, like I felt like I'm biting the bullet here and saying there was absolutely misinformation in the Trump camp that led to the idea of an apartheid state of which the only response to it was violence. And I don't know why you are having so much trouble saying the exact same thing happened in the other camp. And in fact, first.
So to be clear, I have no trouble saying that. In fact, like half of my
But you're trying to make it seem like Trump's is worse when the media are clearly significantly more powerful than Trump when it comes to affecting the public, the public in general. Trump could mobilize a bit of his group, but he ultimately lost the election. He ultimately does not have...
And half the Republicans in the state don't even believe he lost, though, right? Like, so the problem is that, like, I will tell you, I don't even consider it a concession. I'll say misinformation exists on both sides, but you can't seriously tell me that all misinformation is equal. Again, like, there's misinformation, like, if you eat carrots, it's going to make your eyes healthier.
No, I won't. I think the media's misinformation led to more damage objectively, and we can look at that. We can calculate the amount of damage done. We can calculate the amount of people killed. We can calculate how long the riots went on, how many shops and businesses were destroyed. We can calculate those things, how much it cost the country. Just based on calculation alone, the BLM misinformation was significantly worse than Trump's misinformation. Not to say they weren't both misinformation. That shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, but that calculation is going to be very difficult because when I point at the Trump stuff, I'm going to be pointing out like how much economic damage have we suffered because people won't get vaccinated? How many more lives were lost because people don't trust the CDC when it comes to being told to wear a mask or socially distance? Because the damage that Trump did wasn't just restricted to the January 6th riots. It was an undermining.
But we're talking about January 6th right now. I mean, you can talk about... We can talk about misinformation. If we talk about misinformation on a general level, definitely the media are going to have way more hell to pay than Trump. Absolutely. Over the history of forever. But we're talking about just riots.
Hold on. Trump's, I don't know how much conservative media you listen to then, but Trump set the narrative on a lot of right-leaning media. He literally called in multiple times to the Fox and Friends show. People like Rush Limbaugh would literally talk about conversations they've had with him. People like Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson and Rudy Giuliani, these are people that directly sometimes talk to Trump, or Michael Cohen are literally going on these shows from Trump. You can't act like Trump existed in this bubble that was totally independent of the media, number one. And number two, there is still a special, unique fact that Trump was the president of the United States.
You're shifting the goalposts from talking about the riots, because I think we both realize that when it comes to riots, BLM disinformation did way more damage. We can have a conversation about general Trump misinformation, absolutely. But when we're talking about the riots in themselves, January 6th, and the misinformation that caused that versus the misinformation that caused the riots in 2020 with BLM, and those two questions of, is saying the police are racist system, the policing is all racist and the state has no justice for Black Americans, going to cause more or less damage than saying the election was a fraud? Well, we can objectively measure how much damage these things did.
If it was the case that all of Trump's misinformation led to January 6th, and then afterwards we went back to normal, I would agree with you. I'd be like, oh, I would say January 6th, who the fuck cares? But that's the problem. January 6th was just one of the many dominoes that fell as a result of the Trump alternative universe that he was selling to half the people in this country. If January 6th was just a one-off thing and that was Trump's little splurge and it was like, oh, whatever, then I would just be saying, like, who the fuck cares? Why are we still talking about Trump? I don't care. But the problem is right now in the United States, half our Republican Party doesn't think the election was legitimate. A quarter of the Republican Party thinks that Democrats are like raping children in satanic, sex cult rituals, right? Like, the damage is lasting. And if you want to draw like a calculation for like, oh, well, let's just calculate like one thing and try to figure out, like, first of all, you're comparing like the BLM riots, which a lot of their complaints are more rooted in fact than Trump's complaints, which is that there is a lot of unfavorability in our criminal justice system towards minorities. Even if you don't agree that it's as intense as it is, there's way more fact-based arguments there than there are with the election was rigged and stolen by like machines that were created by the zombie of fucking Hugo Chavez, right? It is a totally different world. I will agree that there's misinformation on both sides, but you can't tell me that all misinformation is equal. We both know that's not true. Some types of misinformation is way fucking worse than other types of misinformation. Being told that you can run your car on like 91 octane when you really only need like 85 is way different than being told to put diesel in your car when it only runs on unleaded gasoline. There's way two totally different things, different types of misinformation.
And the Republicans you mentioned that don't believe that the election was legitimate, are they waging a revolution right now?
I mean, in ways, yeah.
How is that revolution taking place?
The entire approach that we have right now to the coronavirus is one of the most heavily politically divided things right now. And I think that is a remnant of like the Trump universe. The idea that we've got people taking the ivermectin now. We did it with the hydroxychloroquine drug before. Yeah.
That's not a revolution. None of what you're saying is a revolution.
Well, then BLM wasn't a revolution.
I didn't say it was.
Okay, well, who's using the word revolution? Why would you use the word
revolution?
I
asked you, like, you're talking about these Republicans having beliefs that our misinformation is extremely dangerous. I happen to believe that most people on this planet, probably even us, believe some information that is misinformation because, as we both agree, the media is shit. But the degree of how dangerous said misinformation matters. So you're saying this idea that a good portion of Republicans believing the election was illegitimate is extremely dangerous. But I asked, are those Republicans waging a revolution right now? Like, are they doing something that is extremely dangerous comparatively to how other people are acting on misinformation? Like in Canada, the mainstream misinformation that there was a genocide and mass graves discovered in Canada, which is completely false, which is causing churches to be burned down. Like, I'd say that's objectively very dangerous misinformation because we are seeing real world consequences to it. Misinformation that leads to people having silly beliefs that they argue with their friends about, not so much dangerous as misinformation that people feel the need to directly act on and are directly acting on, as we see in Canada with the Indigenous graves issue.
So I just completely and totally disagree, but it's going to be hard for either of us to quantify this. I think that it sucks and it's bad, but like 15 churches getting burned down in Canada is nowhere near how fucked our country has gotten over how divisive we are over everything related to the coronavirus. Like I would take 15. I would take 1,000 churches burned to the ground in an instant over the unbelievable divisiveness that exists in this country right now over the coronavirus stuff. But if you're not, but if you don't want to draw a line from like the Trump universe to where we're at with that, and you only want to stop at like January 6th, I mean, if that's how strict you want to make the
I think putting all of coronavirus skepticism on Trump is a bit silly. Sure, I don't
would
doubt.
absolutely do it in a heartbeat.
You look at groups like African Americans, they are some of the least likely to get vaccinated right now. And part of that comes from the fact that they remember government running medical tests on them that were absolutely bullshit and being used as medical experimentation. Like, there are a lot more areas where skepticism comes from than just Trump. I don't think he started that at all. He may have contributed to it. Now he's telling people, get vaxxed, do it. But I don't think pinning that all on Trump is fair.
I'm not, can't pin it all on Trump the same way that you can't pin it all on the media, right? Like, there's going to be like varying degrees of responsibility. But like when we talk about like, I don't believe the medical experience. Like, people will bring up like Tuskegee for brownie points on a YouTube video without realizing that like those experiments affected like 400 people. Sure. It wasn't like that was an experiment right across the entire fucking country, right?
Right. People talking about that doesn't.
People, yeah, and sure, and black people do have issues with the medical systems in the United States, and I don't fault them for that. I think they should still get vaccinated. But black people also account for what? Isn't it like 10% of the U.S. population? Black people aren't the reason why our vaccine rates in the United States got overtaken by Canada in like 3 months. They're not the reason why we have like a 50% like, you know, full vaccination rate. It's not black people. It's I
didn't say it was
overwhelming. Okay, sure, but you're bringing up a very small minority of the population, trying to say like, oh, well, look, there was some misinformation.
I'm just giving an example that there are multitudes of reasons that go beyond
And I'm not gonna, but do you think I would tell you that Trump was the sole source of misinformation? I'm not gonna say that. What I'm gonna say
right now, this whole discussion does seem to be like you saying Trump is the catalyst for misinformation and the most dangerous misinformation in the US at the moment, when he's not even in power anymore. And the conversation you've gone off into has nothing to do with January 6th anymore, which is what we're trying to talk about. Was the information around January 6th of more damaging than the misinformation by groups like BLM? And I don't think it, and I think that's why you're trying to pivot off the conversation, because it's so damn obvious that BLM's misinformation led to way more damage.
First of all, you're trying to get me to compare one man, Donald Trump, to the entirety of the media, and you want to compare like
I didn't ask you to make that. I didn't ask you to make that comparison. You started the comparison. You started to make the comparison. I did not ask you to make that comparison. You were the one who said you think Trump has been the catalyst of all of this misinformation, which I think is an absurd claim. I think it's absurd.
Whoa. I did not say he was the catalyst of all misinformation.
Or that he has been more dangerous than other misinformation. So you were the one who put it all on Trump.
I specifically said at the beginning of this conversation that I view the media as being separate from the legal system. That was one thing, which Trump as the executive is a part of. Okay, so I said that explicitly in the beginning, number one. And then number two, you challenged me to quantify the damage. And you said, well, if we calculate the BLM riots, blah, blah, it's like, okay, well, hold on. If we're going to calculate like all the BLM riots, well, then I'm going to look at more damage Trump did than just January 6th. And if we look at the coronavirus stuff, because that's obviously, you can say that he's not in office anymore, but we both know that doesn't mean anything, because he was in office for his whole last year dealing with this, right? That all of the divisiveness, or not all of it, a large part of the devices that we have in the United States right now has to do with Trump's rhetoric and how we treated it. And I don't care that 10% of the population, black people, have some dumb ideas about the vaccine. That is bad and it sucks, but it is nowhere near the level of harm that Trump like put on the United States.
See, there you go. With it's Trump again. Okay, so if I'm interpreting this correctly, and feel free to correct me, when we were talking and I brought up the media, you were trying to compare, or ask me to compare, the office of the presidency to the media and how much damage or how much impact they can have. Is that a correct interpretation of the conversation?
Well, no, you wanted to bring up BLM first. I didn't want to talk about that at all, but you were the one that wanted to make that comparison between who does more damage for misinformation. Let's talk about the BLM riots, because we can quantify that versus January 6th.
Well, right. The conversation that I was trying to bring up is essentially that I felt like the damage and the discussion of misinformation by Trump was largely overblown in the public's eyes versus how much damage other misinformation does, which then brought up the question of, I mean, I'll have to go back and watch it, but I do believe you said that Trump himself and the president saying something is far more impactful and far more serious of a situation than the media or other groups saying them. And I question that, because I've seen the damage of wide groups like BLM and the misinformation they spread, and I've seen the damage of what Trump spreads. Sure, we can say it's shocking that one man can have that effect versus large groups, but the overall result of the misinformation, who it's spread by or how it's spread, and how that comes about and realizes itself in the real world, to me is what we should focus on, as that's how it's going to affect us, not whether it's one individual or 20 individuals spreading it.
We don't have to. I mean, we can focus on a lot of different things. We don't have to just talk about one thing. I mean, like, if you're going to try to say, like, who spreads more misinformation, Donald Trump, who was president for 4 years of just the United States, versus all the media and all the history of the world. I mean, like, obviously the media wins. I don't think that conversation is worth having.
I thought we were disagreeing on that, because I was like, I don't think you can say Trump was worse than all of the media have been over the last few years.
But that's the thing. Well, if you want to talk about just for the 4 years of Trump, like, what was worse, like Trump versus all of the media during the 4 years of Trump, I would probably say Trump is worse there, because the expectations of the president of the United States are far higher than what I would expect out of fucking CNN,
so you're holding
MSNBC,
them to different
Fox News.
standards. I guess that's the difference, is I'm not holding them to different standards. I think anyone with that level of power should not be a fucking idiot with it and spreading disinformation.
Wait. So to be clear, you hold for-profit media to the same level of responsibility as a head of state?
I hold everyone to the same level of responsibility to not spread misinformation. If you're spreading misinformation, I'm going to call you out equally. Sure, yes, absolutely. The president has more power. There's no denying that. But when it comes to actually challenging misinformation, the media have just as much ability to spread that misinformation as the president, which is how it does damage, is by it being spread. And now, certainly with Trump losing most of his platforms, the media actually have more ability to spread misinformation than Trump. So yeah, sure, we should hold them to different standards maybe, but it doesn't matter really in what the effect of the misinformation is. If it's spread, it's spread. And that's how it does damage. Not, I'm more powerful and I said something. Like, no, it's the spreading of that misinformation that does the damage.
Well, but who spreads misinformation will determine how far it goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I say, like, Anderson Cooper said this, that's not going to be as impactful as President Obama saying this. Maybe we just fundamentally disagree with here, but I mean, I would say that it is almost self-evident that there are different levels of responsibility for people based on their reach and based on their position. I could even say, even within the media, I would say
68% of Americans don't trust what Trump says.
That's a shocking number that is that low. But the problem is that, like, there's, like, even when we look in the media, the responsibility that would place on, like, a local reporter in, like, a small town in Iowa is going to be way different than somebody that reports, like, the city media in, like, New York City, which is going to be way different than somebody who's in national or international media. Like, there's always going to be different levels of responsibility based on who you are and what your reach is. And also, when it comes to telling stories, so if you've spent a lot of time in media, everybody has, like, a different story. It is possible to tell two different stories without really lying, right? Because we selectively choose which facts we want to report, and it's not necessarily a lie. You're just telling a certain way. So there are ways that, like, Fox News and CNN could tell a different story about the same set of facts because they pick and choose what they want to report on. The responsibility that I hold on those people pushing a narrative. If I'm listening to Fox News, I expect that narrative is going to slant right. If I'm listening to CNN, I expect that narrative is going to slant left. If I'm listening to the United States of America, I don't expect maybe it's going to slant
Destiny,
American.
do you think that most people trust politicians more than they trust the media? I think most people trust the media over politicians because they're told politicians lie and the media are the ones that unpack what they say. If anything, most people probably think CNN is more reliable than their average politician. And that's why instead of holding one over the other, I hold everyone with a megaphone to the same standard.
But that doesn't work because you're assuming this insulation that exists in the media from politicians. But it doesn't work that way. Trump would literally listen to Fox News and then go on to talk about stuff that they said, like later on that day. Or Trump or Trump's people would be, like, talking to people commonly from Fox News. They're not these completely and totally separate entities. Like, the politicians and the media, like, oftentimes communicate and reciprocate each other's messaging. I don't think it's just one or the other.
But, like, earlier, I mean, you brought up Hannity and Fox, and, like, these are obviously not the majority of the media. Obviously. The majority of the mainstream media is going to be CNN, MSNBC. Fox News is huge, absolutely.
The largest, Fox News is the largest single media outlet in the United States. That's my understanding. So I mean, like, it's not like they're irrelevant.
No, I didn't say they were. I don't think they are.
Okay. Well, so I mean, like, there are a lot of people that and also I'm pretty sure by polling data, people do trust in the president more than they do in the media.
I'd be shocked if that were true. I mean, show me. I would seriously be shocked. Maybe it's just different in Australia, but no, everyone, doesn't even matter if they're left wing, right wing. They all just say politicians are cunts and don't trust anything they say. So maybe that's just a cultural difference compared to the US.
Hold on one sec.
Yeah.
Also, people say things, but
that they do.
Hold on, I'm reading through this. 1 second.
Yep.
So okay, so on this polling, when I'm looking down at the bottom here, so like I'm looking at how much do Republicans trust something versus how much do Democrats trust something. So like Republicans trust newspapers at 8%, and they trust the presidency at 13%, or they trust like television news at 6%, or they trust presidency at 13%. Sure, but it's still higher. But I mean, like, I think that Trump also played a lot into undermining people's trust of the media as well. Oh, and this was also done in July of 2021.
Well, honestly,
so
looking at the media lately, they kind of deserved it, even if it was, no matter if it was Trump or Biden or Obama or whoever was saying, hey, start questioning the media a bit.
Yeah, but the problem is people didn't question the media.
They publish so much bullshit. So much
but
bullshit.
You know
that you've had stories published about you that are like Destiny is a big racist, evil, whatever. Like, the media publish nonsense all the time.
They do, but the problem is people didn't become critical of the media. They went from believing everything the media said to believing everything the alternative media says, which is even worse. That's the problem. Like, yeah, have I had some dumb stories published on me? Sure, that absolutely exists on places like Slide or whatever. I've had some decent stuff posted on me as well. When it comes to alternative media talking about me, Ralph said that I was under investigation for child porn. Okay, like the Ralph Retort people. Like, I've had tons of insane shit said about me by alternative media stuff, and I'm willing to bet that when it comes to you, I bet some of the worst stuff came out of like fucking 4chan or some of the lefty fucking YouTubers and shit as well. But so like this is another problem too, when people are like, oh, be critical of the media, just like think for yourself or whatever. People didn't do that. They just turned to alternative media instead, which tells even worse lies in the mainstream media.
Aren't you the alternative media?
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
Well, then is it bad that people have started listening to you to hear their news instead of just trusting everything they read on CNN or sites that say you're a racist?
I'm not saying that you should just trust everything, but in the alternative media and in the mainstream media, you can find like good sources of information. Like even in alternative media, there's going to be some places of information that's probably going to be better than others. Same thing with mainstream media. It's very rare that you're going to read like on the ground reporting from like Reuters or the Associated Press that's just completely fucking like a lie. I think that's incredibly rare. Now, if you start going to CNN or Fox, maybe if you get into punditry, it's going to be way different, of course, but you can still find good sources and like, you can still find like good sources out there, but like there's just people will act certain ways if they are truly meaning what they say. So for instance, when people say shit like, oh, I don't trust the media anymore, I do my own research. It's like, oh, really? What kind of research do you do? And they just start linking me like, well, here, I read every single meme that's posted on this Instagram page called Trump will rise above all 2024. And it's like, what the fuck? You're not thinking about anything. You're not being critical of the media. You've just been suckered by some other alternative media that's now selling ads. So it sounds like there's just shit
media everywhere. And you can find good media in the mainstream and terrible media in the mainstream. And you can find good and terrible media in alternative spheres as well. But it's almost good that we've fostered a bit of distrust in the sense of trust but verify question. And I'd agree that there is a problem when people run from one problem to another. And we should probably tell people, get your information from a multitude of sources, read multiple outlets, so then you can weigh and balance what you think is more accurate or more truthful within those reports, especially sites which actually reference the documents, the legal documents that have been released, video, whatever it may be. But I don't think that this condemnation of Trump or Republicans saying, hey, question the mainstream media is, I don't think that's
Trump didn't say question the mainstream media. Trump said the media is the enemy of the people, and then plugged like InfoWars. Like
Did he plug
if Trump
InfoWars?
said,
I think he did InfoWars, but he's done CNN too. I don't know if he plugged it. If he did, then
there was also the OANN or whatever people that he always had every press conference. Trump
of course
did not
he's going to
say,
plug an outlet that is going to treat him more favorably. First of all,
you can try to make these equivalent all you want, but no president has attacked the media in the same way that Trump did.
But do they deserve? The question is, do the media deserve the level of scrutiny that they are receiving? And I think that the answer is yes, they do. But unfortunately, when it comes to an alternative, I think there's a lot of scrutiny from alternative media. And here is the ultimate divide in America, is the mainstream media are constantly tripping over themselves to scrutinize alternative media, especially right-wing alternative media, as just being all horrific, stupid, conspiracies, blah, blah, blah. And then the alternative media, and certainly Republicans, are all trying to scrutinize the mainstream media as being stupid, lying. And it's kind of scary because when the mainstream media lie, they have way more authority behind them, or historical authority, although it's crumbling very fast. And it's both people calling out the shit on either sides. And the problem is we used to have a media in America, North America, that would call out the lapses in both the left and the right when they said dumb, conspiratorial, blue Annan or QAnon shit. But now we just have a media that go out here and question QAnon quite accurately and fairly, but prop up blue Annan conspiracies like Umbrella Man was a far right winger who started BLM riots in 2020, and now we have proof that the right were actually the reason for leftist violence. That is the fundamental problem here.
No, hold on. So the fundamental problem is the level of accountability. Whatever conspiracy theory you just talked about, I've never even heard that before. Now, I'm sure there might have been some left-leaning site that maybe published that story. Maybe, I don't know. I'm going to be
no. This was mainstream. This was like the Washington Post, and
okay, there might have been a post about it, but that is just not the same level of.
Wait, sorry. Did you say? Did I miss it? Did you say that Trump threw reporters in prison? I'm
no.
Okay, good. I thought I missed that.
I know that I know that Republicans are really keen to get on the talking about, what about that time Obama kicked people out of the blah, blah, blah. You're not even remote. If you want to have a whole, I would bet my life on it. I'll be your slave or kill, or in a video game. Never mind. I will, if anybody wanted to have a conversation over who attacked the media more, Obama versus Trump, people want to, what about Obama so fucking hard, where they'll be like, oh, what about the time Obama did the thing with the four? Dude, it was not even remotely close. Trump undermined the media as an institution.
But did they deserve it is the question.
No,
do the media?
No, not to that level. Absolutely not. And for you to try to pretend that, like, yeah, sometimes the media published shit that was wrong or stupid, like Trump, like dumping his fish food into the fish with the president, and it wasn't actually a real story, it was just them being fucking dumb. To try to compare stuff like that to all of these alternative media outlets pushing stuff like the vaccine conspiracy shit.
I'm not comparing
related to like all the other drugs.
I'm saying there's shit on both sides. And to be fair,
you're saying it's all the same, but it's not.
Okay. Would you not agree that if an accredited journalistic source, like let's say like the New York Times, publishes something that is misinformation, that is probably going to be more dangerous than some weird Annan's 100 view YouTube video saying that, fertilizer will cure COVID?
Not anymore, unfortunately, no. I truly think that the other thing is more harmful. Because if you look at the polling data now, and I can go find this, although you probably will believe it, more Americans today get their news from places like Facebook than they do from like mainstream media sources.
But like what on Facebook? Because there's plenty of mainstream media sources on Facebook and pages that are...
Do you think if somebody's getting their news on Facebook, it's all coming from the mainstream media?
I mean, they're probably some of the top sources on Facebook and top followed pages. And unfortunately, they also partake in the same level of just sharing memes. Look at, you look at all these 5-minute videos from Vox and all these sites that just condense a complex story to 2 minutes, and everyone liked it because it said Republican bad or Democrat bad in those 2 minutes, and it's just a really bad clipped, video of one of the politicians saying something stupid. I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to believe that lack of context to information is just as bad as misinformation itself. But
I agree with that, and I think there are times where that happens. And I don't even watch Fox videos anymore because I've come across, because when I'm very familiar with it, I realize like this is pretty dumb. But there's a big difference between like Vox publishes a dumb video that leaves out context or is legitimately like misinformation, it's bad, versus like the society is breaking down now and is being destroyed by the level of like alternative media information that exists today. I don't know where we go from here, but I know alternative media isn't the answer because most alternative media is absolute dog shit. I mean, like we can do a whole day on like fucking like if some alternative media outlets were held to the same standard as mainstream media outlets, Project Veritas wouldn't exist anymore. That would have went under. Like almost every major investigation that they've been under or that they've like been in charge of has petered out into nothing. Has been complete fake news. Has been decontextualized clips. Like that's almost all they've done. But there's no accountability there. James is still running around trying to clip people in a 2-second cell phone video. Like that's all they do. I don't know. I don't know how you can compare and say that like the alternative media is this like good challenge to the mainstream media when they just aren't. So much alternative media is garbage.
But okay, so let me read you a headline here. An ex-KGB agent says Trump was a Russian asset since 1987. Does it matter? Where do you think that headline came from?
I have no idea.
But if you had to guess, do you think that would come from like something on BitChute?
Well, seeing as how you're trying to make a point, I'm guessing it came from something like CNN or MSNBC.
Yeah, it came from MSNBC. And that's what I mean. Like some of the headlines in these mainstream articles, you actually can't even differentiate.
Wait, link me the article. Link me the article.
Most media starts out as alternative until it gets money and sources, and then stories that would generally be called crazy and alternative stories just become mainstream, and people accept them because it's mainstream and repeated by these big sources. So I would say the misinformation is just as stupid from mainstream media. We just don't think it's as bad as alternative media because the alternative media don't have as good graphics as the mainstream when they publish their shit.
Okay, hold on. Okay, firstly, okay, one of us is fucking up really hard here. MSN is not the same as MSNBC, right?
Oh, MSN.com. My apologies. Okay. Still, I don't think we would disagree that MSN.com is a mainstream news
I would not consider that's like Yahoo, or this is not like a number one. And number two, this is an opinion piece. It literally says it. I think that this is a different thing than like the standard like CNN reporting.
Of alternative media is opinion shit too.
But they don't present themselves that way. Like when you listen to somebody like Tim Pool or Alex Jones or any of these guys, like they don't present themselves as just my opinions. They present themselves as like they're delivering the news.
Okay, wait. Let me see. Sorry, 1 minute. I'm just looking something up.
Oh, and I thought you were asking me a question, but this is part of the headline. I don't think there's anything wrong with this headline. An ex-KGB agent says Trump was a Russian asset since 1987. Does it matter? I mean, like, it seems like even in the title, the guy is making fun of the headline. Like, let's say that an ex-KGB agent did say that. Does it even matter? Like, I don't even think this headline is necessarily bad.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to confirm something here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look at okay, so first of all, Jonathan Chai, the guy who wrote this article, is an accredited journalist for the New York Meg. You can look him up. Sorry, I've just lost my tab. New Republic, American Prospect. Yeah, New York Magazine. He writes for. Verified journalist, New York Meg, 206K followers. So I don't think asserting that this is just some random story is quite fair. And then he concludes the article. I somehow lost it in my links here. Sorry. Let me open it again. He concludes the article by saying that the truth, I suspect, was simultaneously about as bad as I suspected and paradoxically anticlimactic. Trump was surrounded by all sorts of odious characters. Putin. In the end, their influence ran up against the limits that the character over whom they had gained influence was a weak, failed president. So this is once again, this is what you see in alternative media that try to lie as well. They'll take something that's shaky, and then with the opinion piece, they'll build it up and be like, okay, so maybe we don't have proof, but he was around Putin a lot, which means they did start to influence him a lot. And you know what? Even though they influenced him, the reason the Russians couldn't execute everything they wanted to do was just because the president was weak and failed. So it's the same thing, the exact same thing that alternative media do.
Okay, can I Can I read this article?
Yes, go ahead.
I don't. This actually seems like a perfectly fine article. When I come across something that sounds absolutely ridiculous, tell me when to stop. Okay.
Okay.
An ex KGB agent says Trump was a Russian asset since 1987. Doesn't matter. In 2018, I became either famous or notorious, depending on your point of view, for writing a story speculating that Russia had secret leverage over Trump, which turned out to be correct. The story's most controversial suggestion was that it was plausible, though hardly certain, that Russia's influence over Trump might even date back as far as 1987. Here is what I wrote in that controversial section. During the Soviet era, Russian intelligence cast a wide net to gain leverage over influential figures abroad. The practice continues to this day. The Russians would lure or entrap not only prominent politicians and cultural leaders, but also people whom they saw as having the potential for gaining prominence in the future. In 1986, Soviet ambassador Yuri Dubinin met Trump in New York, flattered him with praise for his building exploits, and invited him to discuss a building in Moscow. Trump visited Moscow in July of 1987. He stayed at the National Hotel in the Lenin Suite, which certainly would have been bugged. There is not much else in the public record to describe his visit except Trump's own recollection in The Art of the Deal that Soviet officials were eager for him to build a hotel there. It never happened. Trump returned from Moscow fired up with political ambition. He began the first of a long series of presidential flirtations, which included a flashy trip to New Hampshire. 2 months after his Moscow visit, Trump spent almost $100,000 on a series of full-page newspaper ads that published a political manifesto, an open letter from Donald J. Trump on why America should stop paying to defend countries that can afford to defend themselves, as Trump labeled it, launched angry populist charges against the allies that benefited from the umbrella of American military protection. Why are these nations not paying the United States for the human lives and billions of dollars we are losing to protect their interests? I conceded it was probably just a coincidence that Trump came back from his trip to Russia and started spouting themes that happened to dovetail closely with Russia's geopolitical goal of splitting the United States from its allies, but there was a reasonable chance, I loosely pegged it at 10 or 20%, that the Soviets had planned some of these thoughts, which he had planted some of these thoughts.
This is a conspiracy theory, and you're just willing to believe it? He literally said...
Wait.
I speculate that Russia had leverage over Trump, which turned out to be correct without ever asserting any leverage. And he keeps saying, I suspect, and you're just willing to believe all of this?
Hold on. He says that he pegs it at 10 or 20%, and it's an opinion piece. Like, what do you expect from this?
So if I do an opinion piece speculating that, Obama is controlled by another country, that's perfectly fine if I just say I peg it at 10 or 20% or something?
If you say that Obama went and visited Kenya and then he came back after being involved, and Kenya had a history of trying to persuade politicians through blackmail of doing big investments in the country, and then Obama came back right after and was like, you know what, I'm going to run for senator, and when I'm senator, I want to start the Kenyan reconstruction bill, and we're going to send 100 million USA to it. And you wanted to write an op-ed, and you're like, he went to Kenya, they do this shit, he came back, and he did run for senator. No, it's probably only a 20% chance. Yeah, I think that's a fair article to write. I think that's totally fair, sure.
Oh my gosh.
You understand there's a huge difference between doing that and saying, like a lot of alternative media does, saying this thing absolutely happened because of this one email that we saw? You are asserting
all alternative media. When you are alternative media yourself, Van, I'm showing you an article in the mainstream media that is clearly an opinion piece conspiracy theory that is being...
It's not a conspiracy theory. This is a fine piece.
He said he had... which turned out to be correct, that Russia had leverage over Trump without providing any example of the leverage except for his own opinion. This is a conspiracy theory. This is blue and on stuff. That Trump has been a KGB agent or has been an asset of Russia since 1987. This is absurd. And if anyone in the alternative media published something like this, I think there's a 10 to 20% chance that ivermectin is going to cure your COVID, you would be going ballistic over it, even if they had the science behind it.
Because there's a huge difference between saying something has a 10 to 20% chance to cure a disease versus saying there's a 10 to 20% chance.
Versus saying your president is controlled by the Russians? What? What?
So do you think that you should just never be allowed then to write anything like this? Would you say that this article counts as misinformation?
I think it's pretty silly. I think, it's probably portraying it this way and saying that he correctly found leverage that the Russians had over Trump without providing any. Yeah, that's misinformation.
Wait, hold on. What was?
But I don't think it should be illegal.
The misinformation.
What's the secret leverage that the Russians had over Trump?
Wait, hold on.
which
Part
he
of this did he
asserts
say
in the
they had?
first sentence.
Hold on.
Okay. In 2018, I became either famous or notorious, depending on your point of view, for writing a story speculating that Russia had secret leverage over Trump, which turned out to be correct.
I would have. Well, I'd have to click through to his New York Mag and read this much larger story to see what he's talking about.
This is clearly him trying to assert that this was correct in the rest of this article.
I mean, if you want, I can read this whole New York Mag article, but I haven't read this. I don't know. Yeah. This is way longer.
My chat are like, why would you write an article for a mainstream media source about something that you admit is only 10 to 20% likely, and then conclude with, well, even if I'm not right, like, we know that the Russians were influencing him anyway. Trump was surrounded by all sorts of odious characters who manipulated him into saying and doing things. Like, how is that not a fucking insane statement about the president of your country? One of those characters was Putin.
You're overblowing so much.
I'm overblowing it. This article isn't.
Yeah. No, because when I read the article, like, the language is all like relatively conservative. Like,
if Alex Jones says there's a 20% chance pedophile Jews are trying to kill you without any evidence, you'd be flipping over backwards to say this is insane.
Do you want to compare an Alex Jones article to something like this? If you can show me a place where Alex Jones make an insane claim and he says, like, there's probably only a 10 to 20% chance that's true, I would be shocked. Like, are we serious that you think it's the same here? Like, right, if you want, we can start finding, like, I can try to search for, like, daily news or I don't even know what the fuck
this
the
article
Alex Jones
is
called.
Okay, here we go. If there's an article that suggests there's a 10 to 20% chance the election was stolen, we're not quite sure, we have to go through the information yet. Do you think that would be responsible reporting?
If they said that there was a process by which we could rely on the on verifying if the election was stolen or not, yeah, I'd be interested in seeing that.
Okay, and then if they concluded the article with saying, well, even if it wasn't stolen, we know that Biden was surrounded by odious characters who would have manipulated him into doing and saying things that were against the national interests. One of those characters wanted the election to be in Biden's favor. And in the end, we know, like, if they ended the article with that kind of language, basically suggesting, even if we don't have the facts, it's likely that it's true anyways, because insert words like manipulation, insert words like they're against the national interest, you would hate that. And we both know that.
We're reading this article in very different ways.
Yes, you're being extremely charitable to something you don't want to characterize as misinformation because it makes you lose the conversation.
No, I'm not being charitable. First of all, even in the very beginning, for writing a story that Russia had secret leverage over Trump, that I don't know what he's referring to there. So, for instance, if he's referring to stuff related to Michael Flynn, that is actually true. If he's referring to the fact that Trump owes a lot of money in other countries, for instance, Russia, that is true. I don't know what, but you're trying to attack me because I haven't read this like 35-minute New York Mag read.
Okay, we can talk about it another time after you've read it, but I guarantee you there's a hell of a lot of misinformation about Russia and Trump's links to them in the mainstream media, some of which the headlines do read like they could be a random 50-view video on some conspiracy website. Because, unfortunately, there are a lot of people in the mainstream media who really do want to believe blue and on stuff, and they will work their best, no matter how many caveats of maybe possibly 10%, 20% they have to put in to get it published.
That might be the case, but this article, as I've read it, and I'm pretty sure I've finished reading it, this article is not really that bad, and it's pretty conservative with its language. You're trying to take like a couple. First of all, you're giving me just the headline, which even the headline isn't that bad, but you tried to stick it with just the headline, and now you're going to the last paragraph, which again even admits the truth. I suspect was simultaneously about as bad as I expected, and paradoxically anticlimactic, which is actually the realistic like interpretation of Trump's association with Russians. Did Trump have Russian friends? He's a billionaire, of course. Did some of those Russian friends try to exert influence over him? Almost certainly. That probably always happens. But was Trump like a fucking pawn of Putin and was able to fuck our whole political system? Probably not. He didn't really get that much done. I don't think any part of that is even that controversial of an opinion. If you want to find me like an equivalent article that's like that wanders a little bit or asks questions about Biden, feel free to shoot me this. But you better believe that the coverage about Hunter was nowhere near as carefully like worded as this. The stuff about Hunter Biden and the stuff about Burisma and all of that, that shit was insane. And it was so much more aggressive than this. There was no, there's a 10 or 20% chance. It was Hunter got money through Burisma and Biden took that money and he fucking went and he got rid of that fucking prosecutor all alone, unilaterally. Like, it was
and who,
fucking
wait,
different.
Who are you talking about publishing this stuff? Because if I honestly, I can say I have not deep dived into the Hunter Biden stuff. I know there was a bit of a cover up from his laptop stuff coming out from the New York Post. But was there like mass information that came out with Hunter's laptop? If so, I'm against it, obviously.
Sure. There was no Hunter's laptop. That was totally fabricated.
Are you serious?
And yes. And I would have to go back and look through Fox News, but I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty sure I've listened to them talk about this on Fox News over and over and over
when
again.
I look up the Hunter Biden laptop, is it fake? Is the Wall Street Journal saying the Hunter Biden laptop is real? But let me read it.
Hold on. I mean, all the secret files on the Hunter Biden laptop that confirmed the actual laptop is real. It was probably left like in a shop somewhere. But all of the top secret files that confirm like all the shady dealings or whatever, that is absolutely not true. None of that was true. It was never turned into the FBI or it might have been, but they didn't find anything on it. Nobody pulled any big files off of it to like leak any crazy. It was like some fucking porn videos of Hunter Biden like fucking a girl while smoking crack.
Oh, that's what I thought it was. That's literally like I was just under the impression there were videos of him smoking crack on it that got released.
But that wasn't the original claims. The original claims was a huge conspiracy that they asserted that Hunter and Joe were working together to like push this prosecutor out to get like favorable business dealings with a company that Hunter Biden was like sitting on the chair of. It was way, way, way more extreme than that. It wasn't just like Hunter Biden porn videos. And like every single mainstream, I even heard Rush Limbaugh talk about this. I know I would have to go back and look at it, but I know I saw.
Are you talking about the Hunter Biden Ukraine stuff?
Yes.
I wasn't aware that had anything to do with the laptop. I thought the laptop was just crack and pictures of him doing embarrassing things. Maybe I'm mixing this in my head or somebody can check me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of that started with the laptop. When they found the laptop, that was when a lot of that stuff started to be asserted. Is it? Burisma. To my understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I didn't connect the two. Maybe it came out at the same time, and so lots of people mixed channels, probably even me, but from my understanding at this point, certainly. Okay, here. In October, this is from the wiki page, not that I trust wiki these days. So New York Post published an article with the involvement of Donald Trump's personal attorney Giuliani and former chief strategist Steve Bannon about a found laptop allegedly belonging to Hunter Biden. The laptop contained an email, the authenticity of which was not verified, which showed what the New York Post characterized as a meeting between Joe Biden and a Burisma advisor in 2015. Though that characterization was disputed by witnesses. The article's veracity was strongly questioned by most in the mainstream media, analysts and intelligence officials due to the questionable provenance of the laptop and its contents, and the suspicion it may have been a part of a disinformation campaign. So even Wikipedia is still portraying this as questionable. So I'm going to have to read, honestly, I will have to read into this to find out what the truth is, because Lord knows you're not going to find it through one Google search.
Sure, we can do a whole thing on the Hunter Biden stuff, but the New York Post ran headlines for fucking weeks related to this shit. Also, just real quick, I'm pulling a quick paragraph out of the New York Mag article, which that MSN writer had originally written. So he says, it's not difficult to imagine that Russia quickly had something on Trump from either exploits during his 1987 visit or any subsequent embarrassing behavior the KGB assets might have uncovered. But the other leverage Russia enjoyed over Trump for at least 15 years is indisputable. In fact, his family has admitted to it multiple times. After a series of financial reversals and his brazen abuse of bankruptcy laws, Trump found it impossible to borrow from American banks and grew heavily reliant on unconventional sources of capital. Russian cash proved his salvation. From 2003 to 2017, people from the former USSR made 86 all-cash purchases, a red flag of potential money laundering of Trump properties totaling $109 million. In 2010, the private wealth division of Deutsche Bank also loaned him hundreds of millions of dollars. During the same period, it was laundering billions in Russian money. Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets, said Donald Jr. in 2008. We don't rely on American banks. We have all the funding we need out of Russia, boasted Eric Trump.
Okay, so they still
let me finish. So going back to his original MSN article then, if that was his claim that Russia could have potential leverage over Trump, I think that assuming everything he said there was true, then that is actually true.
sorry, in this article, they said potential for all of these things with Hunter as well. So this article is really no different than the one I showed you with all the conspiracies of Trump with Putin. It's all potential, maybe, perhaps this happened. And all this it does is continue to prove my point, because the New York Post would not be considered alternative media. This is just more misinformation from mainstream. If that's true, I have to look through it myself. If it's true that everything they're saying is false.
I never said that all mainstream media is good and all alternative media is bad. I'm just saying there's way less accountability in alternative media. That's all I'm saying.
But you're reading me a mainstream article that seemingly you're worried about has no accountability.
Wait, no. I'm reading from the New York Mag right now. And then this was the article that the other guy had written about that was sourced from that MSN article where he said that, oh, well, this turned out to be true. And you said, no, he made that up.
Okay, sorry, wait. Can you send that? Okay.
Here, sure. This is a much longer.
Sorry, I thought we were still talking about the Hunter Biden stuff.
No, okay, sorry.
Sorry, you jumped to another topic that
I jumped back. You linked me the MSN opinion piece, and then you said that this guy made a claim right in the beginning that wasn't true, that something turned out to be true that wasn't.
No, I thought you were talking about misinformation from New York Meg with Hunter Biden. I lost you there.
Oh, no, sorry. This has to do with, I'm sorry, this has to do with the MSN piece. It's the same author, yeah.
Okay, so I'll do a quick search of his words. Where is the proof that he says in this?
Oh, search for, I think from 2003. If you type in from and then do space and then 2003.
Okay, so from 2003 to 2017, people from the former USSR made 86 all-cash purchases, a red flag of potential money laundering of Trump properties totaling $109 million. So wait. So is this supposed to be the leverage that some of their assets are owned by Russians?
Mm-hmm. So Donald Jr. in 2008 said Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets. In 2014, he said, we don't rely on American banks. We have all the funding we need out of Russia. From Eric Trump.
Okay, so I'm going to have to look into that way more to see what actual percentage of assets, because 109 million doesn't actually sound like that much compared to what Trump's net worth probably is.
Well, your net worth doesn't matter.
How much he owns, how much he has in business assets.
Well, it's about how much liquid cash you have available
compared
to you, right?
billions, you know.
You can laugh, but if you have $2 billion in I can find you a lot of old people
and also
with technically hundreds of, hold on. Just because you have billions in assets doesn't mean you want to have to start liquidating your fucking business in order to buy things, okay? Especially when you're juggling a lot of debt at the same time. So the cash is $100 million in cash is a lot of money to even somebody with a net worth of $2 billion. Because that $2 billion is going to be largely tied up in assets that you don't want to have to liquidate in order to do like other business investments.
So, okay. I mean, like I said, I'll have to look into this deeper, but would you agree that most politicians, Democrat or Republican, have business dealings in different countries, including Russia, Burisma?
To the extent that Trump does? Absolutely not. But I'll be charitable here. It doesn't surprise me as much because Trump is a billionaire and most politicians don't have that level of wealth.
Right.
I would be curious to see it. I would say it's probably a very slim minority of Americans have like own businesses or own buildings or whatever in other countries. That's probably like a really small percentage. Also, it's a lot different to say an individual congressperson or senator has like a building somewhere else versus the president of the United States.
Okay. And do you think it's fair to say because someone has business dealings in another country, the leader of the other country and their government has leverage over you in a political sense, and then tie it to a story saying you're a KGB asset since the 80s?
You say tie it to a story, but for how
that's literally the headline.
We read
which
more
we
than
both
the
know
headline.
people don't
Lauren,
read past.
Lauren,
most
that's
people.
Fine if people know, but we're not people. Okay, we're more informed. We can read past. No one in that article had said that he was a KGB
the point
asset. Number one,
what is
and number
the
two,
deliberate intention of this article trying to imply?
He even says in the article that he didn't say it was 100%. Okay, and number two, The oh fuck, what was I gonna say? Fuck, I don't even remember now. Oh, number two, yeah, I think it is fair to say that there is some leverage there if you have like a fuck ton of money coming from another country. We take this so seriously in the United States that in the US you cannot be a president if you were born in another country, for instance. Like that's a huge part of like our having a US president that was born in the United States of America is this threat or this fear or this worry that oh, and I think even was it JFK? Who there was another president that we had that was like Catholic, and it was a really big deal because people were like, "This motherfucker's Catholic. He's gonna be taking orders from the Pope. We're gonna have a foreign leader." So yeah, having a president that had like that has a lot of ties to foreign countries, that's a pretty unique thing in U.S. history, and that's something that we do worry about quite a bit. It's like built into our political system.
All right. You know what? We can just agree here then. I agree that we cannot be 100% certain that Hunter Biden was on the take from Burisma. Who knows? Maybe. Maybe I'll publish a video with the headline that maybe perhaps he was later. And yeah, maybe perhaps Trump was on the take from the Russians. Nobody knows.
But if you do that, if you publish that headline and then you go through your video and you're like, there's not evidence of this, there is evidence of that, there were dealings here, there weren't dealings there, then that's fine. I'd be like, okay,
but
sure,
maybe, but maybe, guys, maybe.
If you come back and it's like, you know what? Yeah, that's like 10%, I'd say. You know what? If people would have said that Hillary Clinton was 10% responsible for Uranium One, I would have been way more okay with that than people saying like Hillary Clinton 100% unilaterally led the Uranium One deal to sell off 80% of U.S. nuclear assets to Russia. I would have been way more okay with it if somebody would have at least said like, oh, it's like a 10% chance, 100%, sure.
Okay. I mean, like, I think it's a weird standard to hold misinformation to, right? Like, I think it's a bit weird to be like, okay, if BLM went out and say, the United States run by white supremacists, if you're black, police just want to shoot you because you're black, 10% chance that's the reality. Election stolen, completely rigged, taken from Trump, he won by a landslide, 10% chance that's true. Like, to me, it's just a weird stance. I mean, I guess technically you're right. If you're going to spread information, it's better that you say there's a 10% chance it's true than 100. I mean, I guess that's technically correct.
I think the problem is like the comparison of these two sources of misinformation. You can laugh, but the comparison of these two sources of misinformation is so unbelievably, I don't want to call it bad faith, but like BLM was a massive movement that had thousands of figures involved. Some of these people made very real and very true claims about the state of policing in the United States. And a lot of them, a good chunk of them, made absolutely ridiculous claims and wanted to make us a Marxist country. BLM was a huge movement with lots of people. Donald Trump, when it comes to his rhetoric about our elections in the United States, was almost 100% verifiably incorrect and was constantly cheerleading on horrible political thought and horrible attacks against all of our institutions while doing it from a completely non-factual basis that had no basis in this reality. To try to say that like these two things were comparable in terms of misinformation because BLM was a lot bigger, so maybe more people got some misinformation versus Trump, who was just wrong from the top down about almost all of this, I just don't think that's a very fair comparison.
Okay, I first want to make the point that if a story seems only 10% true or only has a 10% possibility of being true, it seems like basic journalistic integrity not to publish that story. That's the first point I make. The second,
Lauren, that's what an op-ed is for. It's an opinion piece. It's an editorial. It's not a report. It's not being published in the New York Times like, here is our factual reporting on Trump. It's a literal op-ed by a guy that like, I research a lot of this, I look into this, and he writes for the New York Mad, which I think is it the same as the New Yorker where they do like a bunch of huge profile pieces? This isn't like on the ground reporting. It's an op-ed. It's an opinion piece. Sorry.
Yes, but but he's obviously reporting it trying to report it as a potentially factual thing. That's like, he's not reporting it as this is my opinion. He's saying there's a 10% chance that this legally factual statement could be true. He's literally
saying, I think. That's actually like his opinion. He's even saying it's his opinion by saying, I think. That's way different than like reporting you would read like on Fox News or like on a CNN article. Like it's completely different.
And newspapers fact check op-eds, man. Like they'll take them down if someone is saying, I think something that is provably false. Like, we know this, or they should.
You will. Okay, I will.
I think the Jews are all cannibalistic Nazi pedophiles. Like, that would never fly just because someone's saying, I think.
We can go on a boat, okay, and we can do all the immigrant stuff you want, okay? I will come and be an alt-writer. If you can find me a single fucking New York Times or CNN or whatever, like, reporting piece where you read a sentence of this, I loosely pegged it at 10 or 20%. That is not something that you read in a reporting mainstream media thing. That's an opinion piece. When somebody's writing like, I loosely pegged it at 10 or 20%, that's an opinion. That's not something that's reported on a mainstream media site. You're never going to read that in a Wall Street Journal or The Economist or Fox News or CNN. Even on Fox News, you're never going to read a sentence like that.
All right, chat, get on the hunt for that. Destiny's going on a boat trip with Lauren.
And we're gonna get the flare guns and everything, okay?
Okay. Sorry.
I have to do D&D in like 5 minutes. So okay. What are your final things you want to go on?
We've gone way off topic from January 6th, and I'm trying to even remember what I was going to say here. I mean, I guess we should pick up this conversation another day if you've only got 5 minutes, because everything I'm going to say is going to open a whole new Pandora's box of things to chat about.
Okay, gotcha. Well, hey, you can always just message me anytime. We can set up whenever you want to chat, and I'm always free to do it, okay?
All right. Enjoyed that. Have a good one. Enjoy D&D.
Have fun. Yep,
Bye.
be careful. Peace out.